Because if there was no burning bush encounter, then Moses doesn't become Moses. Moses does not become the man of God. He does not become the man that we read about in the Bible. His life does not have all these great experiences that we admire and we read about if he doesn't ever have the burning bush encounter, if he doesn't ever have that experience. So I want to dig into this some more because I had this revelation about the bush recently. And my prayer has been, God, make me more like the bush. Whereas most people are wanting to be Moses. They're wanting their life to look more like Moses's. They want to do the things that Moses did. They want to meet with God the way that Moses met with God. I had this revelation that God, make me more like the bush. And we're going to dig into this. I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to go back to those first 5 verses in Exodus 3. So verse 1, it says, now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. So Moses is just doing what he normally does. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. God, make me more like the bush. Because I want to be a person, I want to be a vessel where the fire of God dwells. In the same way that the burning bush was the place where the fire of God dwelled, God, make me a vessel where your fire dwells. And the great thing about this is when you have the fire of God, there's something different. Because it says that Moses looked over and it says, he saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. Another translation says the fire did not consume the bush. Because what happens is in the world, you find a lot of people in culture, in the secular world, just in general, there are a lot of people who have a passion and a fire for something. But what you will find is that as they chase after this passion, as they chase after this thing that they have a fire for, that fire and that compassion starts to consume them. And their life starts to become consumed. And things in their life start to burn up. And they lose important things in their lives because they're so focused, they're so consumed with this passion, whether it's a healthy or an unhealthy passion, it consumes their lives and it destroys their lives in the same way that a fire would burn up and destroy a bush. But instead, Moses realizes there's something different about this fire. Any other bush would be burned up, but this one is not consumed. Because when you have the fire of God in your life, you can be chasing the same passion. You can have a fire for the same thing. But when it's God that gives you the fire and the desire for that, it won't consume you. Because you'll walk it out in obedience to Him. You'll walk it out side by side with Him. And His fire will not consume you. You'll move at His pace. You'll do things His way. You'll do things in a way that will serve God, and He will take care of you, and you won't have to be consumed. And other people will look at you and they'll say, why is it that everyone else is consumed by the passions they chase, but you aren't? How are you different? It's because there's a different fire in you. There's a fire that can blaze and shine and burn bright and still not consume you. God, make me more like the bush. Then in verse 3, it says, so Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush doesn't burn up. God, make me more like the bush. That when people see that there's a different fire in me, they can't help but want to get closer. They can't help but be curious about what this is. How are you different? Why is it that you don't go the same course that other people do? Why is it that you spend less time, that your life is less consumed with your job, yet you're just as successful? Why is it that you can do things differently and be just as successful? Why is it that you can have peace in this and no one else I've ever seen does? Because that different fire will cause people to be curious, just as Moses saw it and said, I've got to get a closer look. Moses had curiosity about it. When you have the fire of God in your life, people can't help but be curious. They can't help but want to get a closer look. They can't help but want to know more. God, make us more like the bush. In verse 4, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." God, make us more like the bush. That when people come over and they have that curiosity and they want to get a closer look, that they're going to see and hear God in my life. They're going to recognize that it's the presence of God. They're going to hear God speaking through my life, whether it's through the words that I say or just the way that I live, that God is going to speak to them through my life because this fire is from him. And in the same way that Moses approached the bush and God spoke to him, Moses said, "Here I am." God, make me more like the bush. So as people draw near and they get curious, they begin to hear you speaking through my life. God, make us more like the bush. And then verse 5, "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." God, make me more like the bush. That when these people get closer to me and they recognize your presence in my life, they start hearing your voice and recognizing it's you, that they start shedding things and removing things from their life that keeps them from being in contact with your holiness. Because that's what happened here. God called out to Moses and said, "Hey, you can't come any closer. Take off your shoes because the ground you're standing on is holy." Now the ground wasn't just inherently holy. It was holy because the presence of God was there. And anything that God is in contact with or deems holy is holy because of him. And the only thing that acted as a barrier that kept Moses from being in contact from what God deemed as holy was his sandals. And God said, "Get that off. Remove that barrier so that your feet can be in direct contact with my holiness, with what is in contact with me, with the thing that I deem holy." God, make me more like the bush so that as people come closer and they hear you, they recognize you in my life, they become convicted and they start wanting to shed things off of their life. They start wanting to remove the things that are acting as a barrier and keeping them from being in touch with your holiness and becoming more like you, getting in contact, getting connected with your holiness, with what you say is holy, Lord. Make me more like the bush